The Dallas Cowboys lost a very key player on their defense on Monday. We'll break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter sometimes at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. And you can follow him on X at McCoolBCB. You can also follow him at Blue Sky at McCool. Landon, free agency officially started on Monday. The Cowboys, as of this recording, we're recording this 1:15 Eastern time, have not made any signings. If that happens during the show, we will update you on any information. But they did lose an important player, somebody that we thought the Cowboys were going to re-sign, and that is Jourdan Lewis, their slot cornerback, who signed a 3-year, $30 million deal with $20 million guaranteed with the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's a pretty big loss for Dallas.
It's a pretty big deal for sure, too. I think obviously Jourdan got his payday, and we were a little concerned that after the season he had last year, really the last few years, that he was going to be eligible for a pretty big payday. And it turns out with the market being as soft as it was in general, and with a lot of teams with a lot of money, especially including the Jacksonville Jaguars, that someone was going to offer him a deal that the Cowboys couldn't match. And here we are. And that he did get offered. I think he is now the highest paid nickelback in the NFL. If I'm
the highest paid, I think it's like pure nickelback in the NFL. Yes.
Yeah. So, kudos to him. I'm really happy for him. He deserved a big payday. Unfortunately, it wasn't the Cowboys that could match him on that sort of deal.
So, first of all, Jacksonville had money to spend. There's a lot of teams that had money to spend, and that's why you're seeing some of these big deals. But knowing that was the contract, 3 years, $30 million, to get $20 million guaranteed, and that's the number that really matters.
Yeah.
Would you have done that if you're Dallas?
I don't know. That's a lot of money. I mean, I think it's something to consider. I think the other thing to consider is, there's a lot, like we said the other day on the show, there are a lot of available nickel corners in free agency and frankly in the draft as well. So I think that, when we talked before, like 8 to 9 to maybe 10 million was kind of like what I thought that he would get. Right. And I was probably willing to go up to 8 or 9, but like 10 million a year plus 20 million, it's 20 million guaranteed, right? Like that's a lot of money, I think. So I don't know. I think it's probably right on the border of where I would feel comfortable, considering he's, he is going to be 31, I think, this year.
Be 30. I think he'll be 30. Yeah.
So yeah, so he's getting a little bit older. I think it's probably was right at what I would do, but I understand that they didn't do it.
So if you look at like a lot of these sites that project contracts, PFF had Jourdan Lewis 1 year, $3.5 million. I think it was Spot Track had him at 1 year, $4 million. For him to get that much guaranteed, I don't want to say it's an overpay because I think Jourdan Lewis is a really good player, but I think it's a lot more than maybe what people were anticipating. And you and I were actually talking about this yesterday. Like, I think there are some teams out there that get really scared about paying slot-only defenders, and that's what Jourdan Lewis is, who are going to be going into their 30s that has an injury history like Jourdan Lewis has. I wanted Jourdan Lewis back. I really did, because I think he's the right type of guy to have on your defense. But I can also understand why Dallas thought, this is probably too much money. Well, this is a good cornerback class for slots. It's a good free agent class. We'll do our best to figure it out.
Look, I don't want to be accused of being Stephen Jones here, but honestly, like looking at the free agent market so far on the first day, there hasn't been a ton of deals so far that I have sat there and felt like, man, I wish we had done that. Like,
the Robert Spillane one just makes me cry, but go ahead.
Yeah, but even Spillane got paid way more than I expected, right? So, but yeah, I don't disagree. Spillane's the one that I would have liked on the team. I just don't know if I would have liked the contract. And I think this is what we're seeing, right, is that, the hours before, tampering started, we started to see the market soften even more than it was, right? We started to see 4 or 5 of the top free agents start to get re-signed by their own teams. We started to see some of those top names sort of kind of drift out of the free agent market. And I think what that ultimately means is that you're going to see a lot of even more middling talent get paid even more extreme prices, right? Because some of the teams, not only are they willing to spend, they have to spend to get over the spending floor. So I do think it's going to make for some of these kind of deals like this where you said it, like the expectation was 3.5, maybe $6 million. Like I said, I would have been willing to go up to $8 or $9 million, but for him to get 10 million with 20 million guarantees on a 3-year contract, like that just shows you what the spending is like right now on the first day of free agency.
All right, so here's the available slot corners. If the Cowboys want to get a slot corner in free agency, it's Mike Hilton, who's 31, that played for the Bengals, a similar player to Jourdan Lewis, but probably going to command similar money. If you want to go out and get a younger guy, Asante Samuel Jr., who we remember from the draft, the Cowboys took Kelvin Joseph, I think, one spot ahead of him. He's 25. He missed most of the season with an injury last year. After that, it goes down to Nate Hobbs, somebody I like a lot from the Raiders. And then you're looking at guys like Noah Igbenogany. You want to get back on that train, Layden? Dane Jackson, Kendall Fuller, Eric Stokes, Mike Jackson, who's more of an outside corner, Dante Jackson. There are guys available, but I think this market's going to dry up pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm reading on Twitter right now that Nate Hobbs has actually already kind of narrowed it down to 2 teams. So I don't know if Dallas is one of those 2 teams. I mean, I think it's one of those things where you start to look at the free agent market. You start to kind of weigh whether it's better to try to sign one of those guys or get somebody in the draft. I think corner is a really kind of touchy position in the draft. Like, I think there are some guys that like have been, suggested for the Cowboys to replace Jourdan Lewis in the first round, but I don't know if they actually match the physical requirements that the Cowboys usually like in their corners. So it will be interesting to see, now that Jourdan Lewis is definitely gone, how they pivot from here. Is this a free agency solution or is this a draft solution?
All right, let's talk about the Cowboys' need at cornerback, because all of a sudden you can make an argument that that's their biggest need on the roster going into free agency. Let's talk about it next. This episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on the progress so that you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only on the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Later, let's talk about the Cowboys cornerback need, because now that Jourdan Lewis is gone and Trayvon Diggs is dealing with a serious knee injury, you also have Josh Butler coming off a torn ACL, probably going to miss most of the season. Where are we at with the cornerback market for Dallas, or the quarterback position?
Yeah, I mean, it's become like a pretty serious need at this point, right? Like, I think that it's one of those things where you're going to need to get 2 guys now, right? Because you need an outside guy you feel like you can rely on while you're either figuring out the Diggs situation or until he gets healthy, and you're going to need someone to kind of come in and play the slot a little bit. Now, obviously, Bland has played in the slot before, so if you wanted to try to go find 2 outside guys and then reduce Bland down, you could do that. I don't know if that's necessarily how you want to play, the situation with Bland. I do think it's going to be interesting to see, like, we're kind of, making these comments as all this stuff is coming in, right? Like, the cornerback market does appear to be kind of all over the place. We're just getting an announcement for Carlton Davis is signing with the Patriots for 3 years for $60 million. Paulson Adebo just signed a deal that for 3 years, $30 million. So, and obviously we got to see guaranteed money on all that stuff, but it does seem like it is kind of vacillating wildly, right? Because I don't know that there's a $10 million per year difference between those two players, I guess, in my mind. So I think the Cowboys have to kind of monitor the what's going on in the market. I've heard that they potentially had interest in Isaiah Rodgers, who was the former Eagles corner. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how the quarterback market in general in the NFL kind of comes into play. And frankly, it seems like it's kind of happening in front of our eyes as we're speaking.
According to David Moore, the Cowboys were trying to bring back Jourdan Lewis. They just didn't get to the number that Jacksonville offered. I've got to believe that the Cowboys weren't planning on this. Now, here's the thing. This happens to all teams in the NFL where you want to re-sign a player. It doesn't happen. He gets more money elsewhere. How quickly can you readjust your plans and go out and get the next best option? I wonder, who the Cowboys have been in contact with. What I don't want to have happen is where they get to April and it's just clear they don't have another starting quarterback on the roster, because that puts you in a real bind going into the draft. This is not the best draft for the Cowboys to pick a corner at 12. Will Johnson is the best corner available, but he's somebody with shorter arms, which we know Will McClay in the front office doesn't love. Didn't do any testing at the combine, not doing any testing at his pro day. Missed a bunch of games this year with a foot injury. You don't want to be forced into drafting a cornerback at 12. So that's why I would assume the Cowboys are going to have to sign at least one, if not two veteran corners over the next week.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if it was two, and maybe even two kind of middle tier type guys, right?
Sure.
Like not necessarily top end guys. I wouldn't be shocked if they tried to go get one of the top end guys or more top end guys, and then just got another body just to have a body, right? Because I do think that at a certain point, there's a question when you're getting talent, like, do you need talent or do you need bodies? And I think at a certain point, the Cowboys are at now where they kind of need both, right? They need bodies and they need talent. So I think getting at least one of these, starting corners out of the way in free agency, even if it's a little bit of an overpay, I think it saves you from having to over rely on the draft to try to fill that need when, look, you really, the best case scenario would be to go into that situation and not have to draft a corner in this class, because it's just not a great class for it. So if they could find a way to sign two like starting corners, that would be, I think, beneficial. I just don't know if they're going to spend like that.
So let me give you another option. What if the Cowboys decided to bring back somebody they know, like Izzy Makamu, and give him a shot at being the starting corner? Now slot corner. I know that's a really weird fit when you have a 6'4" slot corner, but it's not like we haven't seen it before. Would you rather do something like that? Bring back Makamu and then maybe try to sign an outside corner so at least you cover your bases a little bit?
I wish we would have seen more of him as a nickel corner to kind of, get a good feel for that. But I don't hate it. Just what we have seen of him, he seems like he can do it. I'm all on board with bringing back Makamu just because I think he is a useful player who can do a bunch of different stuff. So, yeah, I think maybe what you do is, if you're going to do that, is you re-sign him and then maybe sign another vet or plan on drafting another kind of guy in the
Well, I'm wondering if you could do that and sign Makamu and then sign an outside corner. So at least, you know what I mean? So at least you've got yourself covered going into the draft. Then you don't feel like you have to draft a slot corner.
Sorry, what I meant was actually just to cover that nickel spot. I think what you should do is potentially sign Makamu and then maybe even think about another guy in that same spot who could be an insurance. And then on top of that, yes, still another outside corner, because you need a guy there. I just don't know that McQuamu is a guy that I would want to put all my eggs in right. I love McQuamu, and I think he could do it. I think he could be a plus player at the position, but I just haven't seen it enough to know for sure. So I'd love some insurance there as well.
We're going to get to the rest of free agency stuff here in segment 3, but I did want to mention just really quickly, Myles Garrett got a big deal. It was that Sunday morning, record-setting deal, $40 million a year. And obviously all anybody could talk about was, of course, not Myles Garrett, but Micah Parsons on social media. How much do you think that deal will impact what the Cowboys do with their star pass rusher?
I mean, everyone's talking about that, but I don't think it has any influence at all, because ultimately – at the end of the day, like when you look at the way that they did the deal, it became like essentially a 6-year deal worth like $32 million a year, right? Like, so I think that the numbers are being played in a way to make it sound like it's a $40 million a year deal, but it isn't really. So I don't know that it does actually have an effect on the Parsons contract. I think if anything, it probably just, puts more fire underneath the Joneses because there's the media talking about it. But I think the reality is when you looked at the way that deal was broken down, it actually came in less on an annual year versus over 6 years than what we probably are going to end up paying Parsons anyways. So I think it probably puts some pressure in the media on them. I don't know if it has an effect on the number that ultimately Parsons comes in on.
Now, listen, I am not a sources guy. I'm telling you, I'm not. But we've heard for the last 6 months that the number was always 40 million. Like that's kind of like the target number for Micah. Now, Micah's talked about maybe not having to take that number or structuring the deal in a way that could give the Cowboys a lot of cap space so they could make other moves. And Mike even talked about it. Like it's not that much fun to be the highest paid player in the league, but getting doubled and tripled on every single play. Right. But I don't think like this number of $40 million a year is like so shocking to Dallas or Micah Parsons because this has always been the target. I think fans need to realize that. Like, yes, the Cowboys could have signed Micah Parsons a year ago, but Micah didn't want to sign a deal a year ago because he knew the more he plays and the longer he waits, the number continues to go up. It's not as simple as, hey, we want to re-sign this player. You're re-signing him right now. It's a two-way street here.
Yeah, I mean, I understand we all think that the ownership is dumb and management's dumb, and you're not wrong in a lot of senses, but they know this stuff. They know this stuff way before we do. They have it. Sometimes they get surprised, sure, but like if you think that number was surprising to Stephen Jones and that they're scrambling or freaking out about that deal because that's like more than what they want to pay Parsons, like. No, man. Like they fully understand exactly that no matter what the situation, that he's going to be probably the highest paid non-quarterback when he signs his deal. $40 million is probably right around what they were expecting it to come in at. And again, that's not even what Myles Garrett got. So like if it's still possible that that's what Parsons gets. And if that's the case, then guys, we're like right in line with what we're talking about.
I know. All right, let's talk about the rest of free agency. As of 1:30 Eastern time, the Cowboys have not made any moves. They will in time. Let's talk about what they could be up to next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That is 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who is cutting down the nets. I love March Madness. It's one of my favorite events of the year. That first weekend when we just get games from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday is so much fun. But I also love betting on FanDuel. The app has made it so easy. Just pull it up, bet on the game, bet on the player that you want to bet on for prop picks. It's so easy. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. It's so easy. It's so convenient. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, Landon. So it's, again, 1:30 Eastern time here. Cowboys have not signed any players. yet. What do we expect them to do over the next couple days?
Well, you know what? I think we do actually need to kind of go back because did we ever talk about the fact that they signed Marquise Bell? Because I think that actually happened over the weekend. We should briefly mention they did re-sign Marquise Bell just so that that's out there. I think he's probably coming back with the idea, like apparently they talked about negotiating an opportunity to have a chance to start. So he's going to get an opportunity to try to start. So Marquise Bell came back on a 3-year deal, I think for $4 million or something like that a year. It was a situation where they actually are going to pay him less than his tender that he was supposed to get this year because they were able to move the money around a little bit. So good deal for both sides.
And the reason they did that is because this gives Marquise Bell some long-term a commitment for Dallas, where if he just took the 1-year deal, who knows what free agency would look like. But it's interesting that the Cowboys brought back Wanye Thomas and Marquise Bell. They haven't moved on from Malik Hooker or from Donovan Wilson yet. So they've got 4 safeties on the roster. Maybe one of these guys is an option, like to come back and play linebacker, Marquise Bell, or maybe they just love having the safety depth.
Or maybe, one of these guys is a cut. I think they could save some money by cutting Wilson if he's not a fit. So I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily looking to do that, but if you're looking to try to save some money there, I think that is an option and probably better to get in there a year early than a year late. But yeah, an interesting signing. So kind of back to the thing at hand. So I think obviously we talked about the cornerback depth. That's going to be a position that they are going to need to kind of look into. The defensive tackle market has been kicking so far. We've seen, right? Milton Williams, I don't think has signed his deal officially, but it sounds like he might be Patriot potentially.
Carolina, but Patriots are trying to offer another deal because again, nothing is official until Wednesday at 4 p.m. So you can get these teams trying to one up an offer if they like what they see.
So I certainly think that that's a position that they're going to be looking at. I think we talked about linebacker as a spot that, even though you saw some of the names that we talked about fall, you're probably still potentially looking for another linebacker to kind of help you out, come in early in this situation.
We should mention the linebacker market. We've seen a lot of movement because Zach Bond has signed a deal. Nick Bolton signed a deal. Bobby Wagner got a deal. Ernest Jones got a deal. Sherwood got a deal. Levante David, Robert Spillane. We've just had a ton of movement at the linebacker position, and this is where I wonder, like, if the Cowboys won't just bring back Eric Kendricks on a 1-year deal just to kind of make sure they have another playable linebacker.
Everybody is just trying to retain their starting level linebackers. It feels like because there's just a dearth of them. It feels like in free agencies, and certainly now that everybody recognized that there was going to be a huge market for linebackers, and then ended up re-signing their own. So, I think the linebacker one is probably a spot where you may end up feeling like you need to go to the draft just because, or like you said, a cheap deal with a vet that you're comfortable with, you're familiar with, like Kendricks. Yeah. I think the other spots that might be interesting. Wide receiver has been one that we kind of we know we need a second pass catching talent. I'm not really sure how that gets solved in free agency or the draft, but something interesting pops up, you could see. But I mean, considering what we saw Devontae Adams already get, considering what we've seen Chris Godwin already get, I don't really know that there's anyone out there that is. I mean, there may be like 2 or 3 specific players, but I don't know if the market necessarily as a whole is going to be able to provide what you need at a reasonable cost because of the way that these. I mean, we saw Tutu Atwell get $10 million. And so it's like these teams are paying a ton of money for some of these spots where there's some scarcity on the market. Free agency may not be the best place to kind of go to the wide receiver room. And I think the last one to kind of throw in there is potentially offensive line. Like if they saw an offensive line, I would say swing tackle or a potential starting right guard that they really liked and they felt like they could get on a good deal. I wouldn't be shocked if they just signed someone as competition, maybe not in this kind of first or second, tiers of free agency, but as free agency kind of lingers on a little bit, if someone kind of gets, left out in the cold and it's a good deal, you feel like you've got some players there that you like, but it would always be good to get some nice veteran competition in there as well.
We should also mention edge rusher. We've seen a couple of the edge rushers go off the board already. Khalil Mack signed a 1 year, $18 million deal. Hassan Reddick got 1 year, $12 million. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a spot where Dallas is looking to grab somebody else, whether that's one of their own in DeMarcus Lawrence or Chauncey Golston, or even if it's somebody else out there, whether it's like a Matt Judon, if they want a little bit older of a guy. I doubt they'd be in like the Josh Sweat market, but maybe they're in the Malcolm Kuntz market, a really talented edge rusher for the Raiders. I just wonder if you're looking at like where the most talent is in free agency, it's probably at edge rusher. And I do think the Cowboys could maybe get a decent player there at a value.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to let the front part of it cool a little bit because, I mean, I was shocked to see Hassan Reddick. I mean, I guess not shocked, but after what he pulled with the Jets last year, a little bit surprised to see him get that contract. But I guess that's why you're getting a 1 year deal versus a 3 or 4 year deal, which is probably what your skill is worth. Yeah, I mean, I think edge rusher is another one, and I also think that edge rusher is one that you could probably get some good quality because the kind of edge rusher you're looking for is not the expensive type of defensive end, right?
Mm-hmm.
More the big body guy. So if you can find one of those guys in free agency, just kind of help shore up the other spot a little bit. And, hopefully DeMarcus Lawrence, that would definitely make you feel better about where that defensive line depth is.
All right, I'm going to make a prediction before we do our Tuesday show. I think the Cowboys are going to sign an outside free agent before we do our show tomorrow, Dan, and we're going to be able to talk about a new free agent addition. If not, this is going to be a very depressing show on Tuesday. So trying to good vibes only. Right?
That sounds like wishful thinking more than anything, honestly, but we'll see.
Well, I almost think with their cornerback need that they have, I just don't think they can wait here.
Yeah, that's fair. And there's guys still available that are quality starters that you can get in there.
Yeah.
You may overpay them, but you could get them in there and at least feel better about how your corner room looks, at least going into the season.
All right, we'll see. All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube, download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. You can also check him out at Blue Sky at McCool. I'm at Marcus_Mosier on X. I think same Blue Sky. I don't remember. It's a lot of different social media apps. But again, go check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and we will see you right back here on Tuesday.